Everyone knows Diana as the people's princess, but before she belonged to the people, she was a broken child who didn't even belong to her own mother. The woman who taught the world about compassion learned about heartbreak before she could even spell the word. On a cold winter morning in 1969, 6-year-old Diana Spencer sat on the grand staircase of Park House. She held a small suitcase in her hands. Her mother, Frances, had told her she was only going away for a few days. A few days felt like eternity to little Diana. Frances Shand-Kaid was only 33 years old, a woman of striking beauty. Her long blonde hair, steel blue eyes, and grace drew attention from Norfolk society, but she was also someone who couldn't bear the weight of being married with 4 children, of being a housewife in a grand estate. The fire of freedom within her was breaking through the constraints of traditional roles. When she hugged Diana that morning, she knew this would be her last embrace. But Diana didn't know. The little girl breathed in her mother's perfume, holding on as if that moment would last forever. Frances's eyes filled with tears, but Diana didn't see them, because a 6-year-old child couldn't imagine that her mother would abandon her forever. "When will Mummy come back?" Diana had asked of father, Earl Spencer, that day. Johnny Spencer looked into his daughter's innocent blue eyes. The 8th Earl Spencer, as a nobleman, was accustomed to maintaining his composure at all times. But in that moment, he didn't know how to tell his daughter the truth. How could he tell her? Frances had run away with another man, Peter Shand-Kaid. She had abandoned them, abandoned Diana, abandoned the other children. Johnny Spencer silently stroked his daughter's hair. "Mummy has gone on a rather long holiday, Diana. You'll be safe here with Daddy and your siblings." He was lying, but was telling a 6-year-old child that her mother would never return, better than letting her experience heartbreak all at once. Diana waited for days for her mother to return. Every car sound sent her running to the window. With her small hands, she would fog up the glass, holding her breath as she watched the road. Every phone ring made her heart race wildly. Maybe today was the day. Maybe Mummy would come home. Maybe this long nightmare would end. But days passed, weeks passed, and Diana slowly began to understand. Her mother had left. She had really left. This wasn't a temporary situation. This would last forever. The staff at Park House noticed the little girl's transformation with pain. Mary Clark, Diana's nanny, was particularly worried. This elderly woman who had served the Spencer family for 30 years had never seen anything like this before. Diana, who had once been cheerful, talkative, and full of mischief, had become a withdrawn and silent child. The innocent sparkle in her eyes had dimmed. A deep sadness had settled in its place. At night, Diana would cry herself to sleep. She hid her mother's photograph under her pillow, whispering to it in the darkness of night, "Mummy, why didn't you come? Did I do something bad? If I'm very quiet, will you come back?" These questions would echo in the air and disappear into silence. When Mary Clark checked on Diana's room at night, she often found the little girl awake. Diana would sit in her bed, watching the window. When car headlights passed by the road, she would straighten up hopefully. Maybe this time it was her mother. Maybe Frances had finally returned. "Diana, sweetheart, come sleep now," Mary Clark would say gently. But Diana would shake her head. "Mummy will want to see me here when she comes. If I sleep, I might miss her." This childish logic broke Mary Clark's heart. Diana's older brother Charles, despite being only 10 years old, understood the seriousness of the situation. He tried to protect his little sister, telling her that their mother would return. But Charles wasn't sure himself whether Frances would really come back. He was just trying to ease Diana's pain. This waiting lasted for months. A striking change can be seen in Diana's childhood photographs from this period onward. In photographs before 1969, There's a cheerful, smiling child. Afterward, the sparkle in her eyes has dimmed. Her smile has become forced, like a mask put on to please the photographer. This 6-year-old child had learned the meaning of abandonment in the most painful way. When she started school, the teachers at Riddlesworth Prep School immediately noticed that Diana was different from other children. Miss Janet Thompson, Diana's class teacher, was concerned about Diana's behavior. When other children talked about their families, Diana remained silent. When projects about mothers were assigned, Diana would pretend to be sick. Because she couldn't draw her mother, she couldn't describe her mother. Her mother wasn't there. One day, Miss Thompson asked Diana to write a composition about her mother. Diana stared at the blank paper for a long time. Finally, she picked up her pen and wrote a single sentence. "My mummy is on holiday. I don't know when she's coming back." When her teacher read this sentence, she struggled to hold back tears. Diana's loneliness was also noticed by her school friends. While other children's mothers dropped them off at school, Diana was brought by a driver. While other children's mothers watched school performances, Diana looked for her father in the audience. But her mother never came. A classmate named Penny Thornton would say about Diana years later, "Diana always had a sense of something missing, as if she was constantly searching for someone. Now I understand she was searching for her mother." This wound would never heal. As years passed, Diana learned to live with the fear of abandonment. This fear followed her like a shadow in every relationship, every friendship. At West Heath School, when she was 13, Diana saw her mother for the first time in years. Frances had come to visit. Diana had prepared for that day for weeks. She had worn her most beautiful dress. She had carefully combed her hair. She had tried to become a girl her mother would look at with pride. But the meeting wasn't what she had imagined. Frances was different now. She had a new marriage, a new life. She behaved lovingly but distantly toward Diana, as if Diana was a part of her past, not her present. Diana cried at school that night. Her friend Caroline Pride asked her, "What happened?" Diana struggled to answer. "Mummy came, but she wasn't like my real mother. She was like a stranger." These words perfectly summarized the brokenness inside Diana. During her high school years, Diana's behavioral patterns became more pronounced. She was excessively trying to please others. She did everything to ensure no one would abandon her. She put her friends' needs before her own, forcing herself to fulfill their wishes. Miss Ridsdale, Diana's school principal, was concerned about the little girl's behavior. "Diana is constantly seeking approval. She's constantly trying to make sure she's loved. This isn't healthy. A child should be confident that she's loved unconditionally." But Diana had never felt this security. Diana's first romantic relationships were also affected by this fear of abandonment. Her relationship with Simon Berry, whom she met at 16, ended because of Diana's excessive attachment. Simon would say years later, "Diana seemed to be constantly afraid of losing me. It was very intense. It was unbearably intense for a 16-year-old boy." When Diana moved to London in 1977, the characteristics of the young woman who had grown up motherless became even more pronounced. While living with her friends in the apartment at Coleherne Court, she constantly acted like a mother to them. She cooked, cleaned, tried to keep everything under control, because if she made herself indispensable, no one would abandon her. Carolyn Bartholomew, Diana's close friend, remembered that period. Diana was mother to all of us, but at the same time, she was also the most fragile one. We would hear her crying at midnight. When we asked why she was crying, she would say, "I don't know. But now I understand. That 6-year-old girl inside her was still waiting for her mother. Her meeting with Prince Charles was also significant from this perspective. Diana first saw him in 1977, during the period when he was with her sister, Sarah Spencer. For 16-year-old Diana, Charles at 30 seemed mature and reliable, a father figure, a protector. The weekend at Philippe de Par's house in 1980, when they encountered each other again, would change Diana's life. But Diana's interest in Charles wasn't just romantic. She had found in Charles the sense of security she had been searching for since she was 6. When Diana said to Charles about Lord Mountbatten's death, "You look so sad. I thought you might want to talk." These words came from her empathetic nature. This empathy was her ability to understand pain taught to her by growing up motherless. As Charles's interest in Diana increased, so did Diana's fear of abandonment. After every phone conversation, she worried whether Charles would call again. After every meeting, she thought this might be the last meeting. Her friend, Virginia Pittman, described that period. Diana constantly talked about Charles, but not like a happy lover, like someone who was afraid of losing something very precious. She constantly asked, "What if he doesn't love me? What if he finds someone else?" When the marriage proposal came, Diana's reaction was complex. She was happy, of course, but she was also afraid. When Charles asked her, "Do you think you're in love?" Diana had said, "Of course," but Charles's response, whatever that means, had set off alarms inside Diana. These words had triggered Diana's deepest fears. During the wedding preparations, Diana's behavior also showed signs of fear of abandonment. She behaved excessively perfectionistically, trying to get everyone's approval, because if she was perfect, no one would abandon her. Barbara Cartland, Diana's grandmother, had visited Diana during the preparation period. "Diana is very tense," she had written in her diary. "She constantly acts as if something will go wrong, as if she's afraid this happiness isn't real, that it will be taken away from her." The wedding day, July 29, 1981, was both the happiest and most frightening day for Diana. As she walked in St. Paul's Cathedral, the 6-year-old girl inside her was still afraid. What if Charles abandons me too? During the honeymoon on Balmoral, Diana's conflicted emotions became even more pronounced. On one hand, she thought she was the happiest woman in the world. On the other hand, she interpreted Charles's every behavior as a sign of abandonment. Lady Clermont, a lady-in-waiting who worked at the palace during that period, remembered Diana's first days. Diana constantly wanted to know where Charles was. Was he in a meeting? Who was he seeing? When would he return? This wasn't normal curiosity. This was a kind of panic. When Diana learned about Charles's past with Camilla, she felt as if all her fears had been justified. The thought, "I'm not good enough, that's why I'm being abandoned," that she had carried inside since she was 6, had returned. Diana's struggle with bulimia was also directly connected to this fear of abandonment. Eating disorder specialists said Diana's condition stemmed from fear of losing control. The child who had been abandoned by her mother was now experiencing fear of being abandoned by her husband. Dr. Maurice Litfedge, the psychiatrist who treated Diana, explained the situation. Diana's bulimia was a form of self-harm. The logic of, if you punish yourself, no one can hurt you. This is a defense mechanism commonly seen in children abandoned at an early age. William's birth was a turning point for Diana. For the first time, she felt unconditional love. William wouldn't abandon her. William would love her unconditionally. When Diana hugged William, she was trying to give the maternal love she had been deprived of since she was 6. Barbara Barnes, William's nanny,
described Diana's mothering attitude. Diana was a very loving mother, but at the same time, she was overly protective. She didn't want to lose sight of William for even a second, as if she was afraid of losing him too.
Harry's birth triggered the same emotions. Diana now had 2 children. 2 people loved her unconditionally. 2 people would never abandon her. But even her children couldn't completely heal Diana's fear of abandonment. As her relationship with Charles deteriorated, Diana's panic increased. She tried to appear perfect in front of the press, tried to make everyone happy, because if everyone loved her, no one would abandon her. The British people's love for Diana was very important to her. For the first time since she was 6, she felt truly loved. The people wouldn't abandon her. The people showed her unconditional love. Diana's interest in charity work was also meaningful from this perspective. When she hugged children in hospitals, she was actually trying to heal that abandoned child inside herself. Every love she gave to a child was the love she couldn't receive. Teresa de Bertodino, Diana's close friend, explained this side of the princess. Diana's love for children was limitless, but this wasn't just natural maternal instinct. This was an effort to heal her own wound. She was telling every child, "You won't be abandoned. You are loved." When the separation from Charles was announced in 1992, Diana's first reaction was fear. She was being abandoned again. She was alone again. But this time there was something different. Now she had her children, and she had the people's love. When Morton's book came out, Diana had told her own story for the first time. The pain of that 6-year-old girl, the fear of abandonment, the longing for her mother. This book had been a kind of therapy for Diana. Diana's BBC Panorama interview served the same purpose. When she said, "There were 3 of us in this marriage, so it was a bit crowded," she was actually saying, "I was abandoned again." But this time she wasn't silent, she was crying out her pain. When her divorce from Charles was finalized, Diana felt both free and afraid. She was 36 years old and truly independent for the first time, but at the same time, that 6-year-old girl's fears were still inside her. Her relationship with Hasnat Khan was different for Diana. For the first time, she was trying to love someone without fear of losing them, but her old habits continued. She wanted to know where Hasnat was, constantly trying to stay in communication with him. Dr. Khan spoke about this relationship years later. Diana was a very loving woman, but at the same time, she was very fragile. She constantly experienced fear of abandonment. This was a wound from her childhood. In the last years of Diana's life, she heard that 6-year-old girl's voice more often. William and Harry were growing up. They too would leave her and go. This was a normal thing, but it was frightening for Diana. Paul Burrell, Diana's butler, described the princess's last months. Diana was very happy, but at the same time very afraid. She would say, "My children are growing up, Paul. Soon they'll abandon me too." This was her greatest fear. Diana, who died in Paris on August 31, 1997, had finally been freed from that 6-year-old girl's pain. But this pain had been the most important factor shaping her life. At Diana's funeral, when William and Harry walked behind the coffin, the world didn't know the story of that 6-year-old girl. The world's most beloved woman was actually a child who had been deprived of her mother's love. And perhaps this is why Diana never allowed any child to feel abandoned, because she knew very well what abandonment meant. She had learned it at 6 years old and never forgot.